Hi, on behalf of the Office of Work Life, I'd like to welcome you today to this Lunch and Learn that is about how we can cope with grief, especially during the holidays, and also on anniversaries and birthdays and things like that. It's a difficult time for people, and so we've come to learn from Miss Peggy Williams, who is here from Bluegrass Care Navigators, and that's a good resource for everyone to have because they can come. Right. Right, everyone has grief, and they can come to you guys for services even if they don't use you for hospice. So anyway, welcome, Peggy Williams.
Somewhere?
Yep.
Back on you. Sorry, folks. I can't see the little clippy.
And I should say that people on Zoom, if you could hold your questions till the end, that'd be great.
Okay, it's not clipping, so I'm gonna. Oh, I see what's wrong. The little thing needs to go inside here. Needs to go
You're right. We're an engineer in another life.
Oh, not at all. Yeah, now try that.
Nope, not at all. We have technical. Yep, that's more.
All right. The old, can you hear me now? All right. As Patricia said, my name is Peggy Williams. I am a bereavement counselor. I have worked with Bluegrass Care Navigators, which was formerly Hospice of the Bluegrass, for 20 years. So I have been around a long time. I will say this about myself. I am a group leader. I am not a presenter. Although I do dominate conversations, I don't generally do it with a microphone. So what I would like is for this to be a very interactive session. So please ask questions because that's why you're here. You have questions. So ask questions, but please be mindful that we only have 50 minutes, probably now 45 with the whole microphone thing. And share what you need to share, but please be mindful that the details of your loss may need to be shared at a different time. So because it's very easy anytime you're speaking to try to go into that story. So that's when you come to our groups. I would like for you all to introduce yourselves, just first name and type of loss, my mother, my father, my spouse, my child, etc., if you would. So would you care to start? I'm actually here as a support person, but experience. Mm-hmm. I'm actually here to help understand what it's like. So you sort of have an anticipatory situation going on. Mm-hmm. Tricia, would you like?
I'm Nancy, and I would like to learn how to be a great counselor. I'm Maddie. I'm Maddie.
Wanda, nephew and sister.
Okay. Right. The older we get, the more grief experience we unfortunately have. Although we've worked with some very young children that have a lot. What I would like to do is start out to get it interactive by asking some questions, and you can just kind of throw up your hand if you've experienced this or believe this. First, grief is hard work. Grief can be confusing. Grief can be overwhelming. Right? Now, Christmas, holidays, is hard work. Holidays can be confusing, and holidays can be overwhelming. So now we have a sandwich situation here, and it's not one that we like. People come in here to these sessions looking for answers on how to handle the holidays during this difficult time. So at the end of the session, I'm going to share this little card with you that may provide some insight into the human condition under stress, because that's just what we've identified, stress. There is a flyer in your handout, education sheet, that talks about the way stress affects you. So those of you may have already seen it. For those that haven't, I always say this particular sheet, if you took the gingerbread cutout and put on this is the human condition. We are not just this or this. We are all of this. Stress, which is grief, which is holidays, which is every day in our world. This is what happens to us. So it affects you physically, mentally, very much so, your cognitive, emotionally, behaviorally. We are made up of systems. These are most of them. The one system that's not on here is the spiritual. That gets affected, but that's another whole ballgame. So I put this in here just so you can recognize none of us are above the human condition. And that's it. So first thing I'd like for you to do is to hold up your hand, please, just about along in here and look at it. All right, look at the person's hand next to you. Just glance around the room. This is our hands. All right. While they're all very similar, they also have some distinctions. What is the primary distinction amongst our hands? Pardon? There's one thing that is the primary. No one else has this. Your fingerprints. Thank you, your fingerprints. While all the other things are unique and similar, your fingerprints are absolutely unique. And they used to say a lot, grief is like a person's fingerprint. No other person, regardless of the loss, is going to have the same reactions you do, even in the same families. And you may be finding that one out. So I bring that up to just start with the idea that even though most of us are in here because of having a loss, your life journey, your particular makeup, your particular family situations, your particular traditions, these all make your situation unique. So folks come to me very often and they want the checklist, you know, that checklist of how do I do this? Meaning, how do I get over this? Because this does not feel good. So how do I get through this? Well, I have to tell them, you don't get through this. You learn to live with this. Now, will it always stay this way? Well, absolutely not. I mean, for a lot of us, all we have to do is look in the mirror and know nothing stays the same. Everything changes. So it will change. It will shift. It will go back and forth. Stages of grief were wonderful in their day, but they are absolutely out the window now. It's like the rotary telephone. And for those of you that don't know, y'all can ask someone later what that is. So I have also in this copies. I'm very old school, which is why you get paper. There's some copies of some books that I find very helpful. The first one I'll be referring to a lot. The second one is just a daily meditations. The third one is a wonderful, wonderful book that is written by the same gentleman, James Miller, that I just happen to resonate with his style of writing. And the reason why I gave you the covers is so you can look them up. Some of them may actually be out of print. That's how old I am. And you may be able to find them on one of the Amazon sites for pretty inexpensively. So my first book is this one. How will I get through the holidays? Which is why everyone's in here. So his introduction basically says the same thing I said. Whatever your age, whoever has died, whatever the cause of the death, holidays lived in the absence of someone dear can be very difficult time. If you're like most people in grief, you will have many questions. It's important for you to know at the outset there are few universal right and wrong answers. So that's just kind of the foundation for the fact that you have an individual situation here. And so you have individual anxieties. And I want those to come out so that we can sort of address some practical issues of how do I do this? Not how do I do this? There's no answer for this. We don't really have control of grief. Grief, like death, it's a mystery. I've worked with it for 20 years, and the more I know I don't know anything. I mean, it's just a mystery. So it's pretty much out of our control. And that is not something, especially in the United States, but in the world these days, we don't like to hear. I want to have some control of this. I want to be able to all right? Everybody has their checklist. It doesn't work that way. You can tell from the stressor reactions worksheet that grief can permeate absolutely, without your knowledge, any part of your human condition. It's actually bigger than the human condition. Again, it's the mystery. So it can affect your heart, body, soul, and mind. And you can't not have that. That is a given. So the first chapter in How Will I Get Through the Holidays is accept the likelihood of your pain. When you're facing your first holiday without the one who has been so close to you, a good starting point is with the awareness. Awareness is a big word. Chances are it will be a painful time. Further down here it says, similarly, it is probably unwise to pretend everything is perfectly normal and that this year's festivities will be no different than every other year. Well, I can tell you from experience after my mother's death, it's different. And again, uniquely, I remember hearing a speaker before my mother died, and she was talking about when her mother died, and her sister got in the kitchen and made mom's favorite recipe, and they were just joined together, and it's just this, like, that's the way to do it. That didn't work in my family. 4 dominant females who now everybody's vying for control of the burner. Turn it up, turn it down, didn't work. And when we went through that first holiday, it was like, we're not doing this again. So basically, most of holidays are you find out what doesn't work. But planning ahead helps you find out some things that might work. I keep referring to my notes. Like I said, mostly I'm a group person. And so I get from the interactive part. So to be sitting in front of a camera with everyone staring at me is a bit, disconcerting. On the other side, I always talk about the railroad tracks. So here is your grief. And I've just said, that's one track. We're the engine going down this thing. And one track is grief, and we don't get to change that. It is what it is. But the other track is our life. And so now then, the grief has sort of gotten wobbly, made the life one kind of wobbly. We don't control this, but we actually can control some of the life circumstances. And so that's what you look for. Not, oh, can I avoid this? But, oh, how can I be aware of this? And how can I understand this? And how can I deal with it in this moment? Because that's what grief is. I know out of this number that someone's experienced this in your grief. You're fine. You're talking to somebody, and all of a sudden, you have no idea this is going to happen, and you just get overwhelmed with emotional response. You go to the grocery store. You've got your checklist. You're doing good. You reach for this particular item that they loved. Oh, and Christmas is, the holidays are just absolutely the landmine for this. Because the songs that are playing, the aromas that you have. It's not just the moment of. In our world nowadays, it's the whole time before. So holidays nowadays actually include Halloween. I had one woman that she and her mother were huge Halloween decorators, and mom did the stuff in the kitchen and made, all these kinds of goodies for people to eat in the neighborhood. She did all the outdoor work. They loved it. Halloween was the hardest of the holidays for her, which I don't really consider it a holiday, but then that's my personal thing. So this track is your life, and we have some control. We humans have a tremendous capacity, a miraculous capacity to change the outer circumstances of our life by changing the way we think. One of my very favorite quotes, and I hand out to folks all the time, and I read it myself, is by Viktor Frankl, who was a concentration camp survivor. He wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." That pretty much is about most things in life. With mindfulness and awareness, we can learn ways to recognize our problems and discover ways to cope with them. What I hope to share with you today is not how to change your grief, because I've just said, you don't change that. That is. It's how to change the way you think about your grief. So, going back to accept the likelihood of this being a painful time of year. In my 20 years of working with death and grief, I have seen and heard many life experiences of how to handle the holidays. The most common sentiment, and you may have had these thoughts, is, just wish I could ignore them. I wish they would go away. I wish they were just over. This type of thinking results in a person's compartmentalizing their grief and pain. They may verbalize their stress, how most of us have this tendency to say, oh, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on. But then intellectually, we know how to handle it, but we can't seem to get there. So awareness says, hear yourself. Because from my perspective, doing this a long time, what I know is folks really do have the answers within. Because I can sit up here and I can give you 25 ways to handle the holidays. And that's just information. If it doesn't mean anything to you, it's like I can ask 20 people, do you like this shirt? Oh, I love that shirt. I love that shirt. If I don't like this shirt, guess what? I'm going to think, well, I'll ask somebody else. We humans are interesting. So again, we have our own knowledge and answers. Mindfulness and awareness helps you to calm yourself. Accept that this is painful. Accept that this is different. Accept that things are changed and will continue to change in life. But also accept that you do have some ways of changing how you think about the situation. So that's making sense? All right. Yeah, this is not interactive so far. I told you I have a tendency to dominate, so obviously the mic doesn't change that. What I find with folks that talk about how hard it is, but can't get to that inner knowledge that says, how am I going to do it different? They will talk about how hard it is, and they will continue to do the same thing that they've always done, which obviously is not going to get the same results. There's another quote in here when they talk about planning for the future, planning for the holidays. And it says, remember this, few holidays are as picture perfect as we'd like to believe. It may help to admit that from the start. So again, awareness says, this one's going to be different. But honestly, most Christmases, most holidays, most Thanksgivings have been somewhat different. There was a year that the turkey didn't get done. It was like, all right, well, we're just going to eat it because everything else is ready, sorts of holidays. So they're not perfect, be aware, remind yourself, this is a day like most days when you're in grief, actually. It's hard. But we know that anticipatory, yeah, I've experienced it and know this from work experience, anticipatory of anything is harder than dealing with it when it gets there. So just knowing that you will have anxiety building up to this, learning to recognize it, learning to make plans and be willing to change plans is probably the best way to cope with that. Again, folks that verbalize change and don't change will give reasons for it. You know, well, everybody's expecting me to bring, 14 different casseroles. Well, I've got those grandkids that I've got to be this particular way for. Well, my adult children think I need to. One thing I've learned between age and life experiences, no one's going to understand where you're coming from. You're unique. Your adult children or your adult siblings or those little kids, they're coming from their own perspective. It's each of our responsibilities to understand how to take care of self. So in here, they talk about taking care of self. And in that, they do, what do you think they say in these books whenever they say, take care of self? What's number one? How do you take care of yourself? Sleep. What's number two? Eating. And then number three, don't overcommit. All of those things. Remember when I said you know these things? You know these things. But you have to be mindful and aware. So, bereaved individuals, this is a quote, who seem to experience the most difficulty with the holidays are those who have given little thought to the challenges they will encounter. What I'd like for you to do, there's a blank sheet of paper in there, and you each have a pen. In an effort to help you find your place on, do I push through and hunker down and do everything so that everybody else is happy and I do it the way we've always done it? I've got 400 different cards I need to address and I've got to get the stamps, and then it's like, oh great, I'm 2 cards short, but now I have to go buy a new box. You know the routine. So between this, I have to, and the other end of that continuum, which I need to be aware of, where do you want to fall? So in helping you discover that, you have to discover, what are your issues with Christmas? So I would like for you to write down a few of the major things that are causing you concern and anxiety about these upcoming holidays. The first step to problem solving is figuring out the problem. Give it another few seconds and then we'll wrap up. So we can do this one of two ways. You can share openly, or if you prefer, we can put them all in the middle of the table and I can pick them up and read from them. You prefer anonymity or openness? I could repeat the question if they read it. Would that work? Okay. So would you care to read one of yours then?
Where did you go? We always went to my mother-in-law's. Where do I go?
So the question is, Christmas was always at mother-in-law's house, and she is the one that has died. So now where do we go? Same thing happened when my mother died. It was always at mom's house, kind of a thing. So we'll put that one on hold and let's kind of ask some others and sort of get a general idea about the variety of questions. Anyone else care to share one? The concern is being a support to mom because dad died during the holidays. All right. This side of the table?
For me, it's just in general, this is the first holiday.
So what specifically causes such an emotional response to that?
Not knowing how my dad is going to react.
So the overwhelming emotions for self and family, right? That's generally a big one. Did you have one you would like to share?
Just got people in two different states of how to deal with that. Multiple places.
Mm-hmm.
Could be both.
Mm-hmm. So again, it's like, where do I have Christmas? Where do I put my, did you have something?
I think my mom always decorated the house a certain way. So even something as basic as that, like whose responsibility is that now? Except it's mine.
Mm-hmm. So the decorating, who's going to do it? How are we going to do it? Lots of work. Mm-hmm. So those are all really normal questions. Did you have one that you would share? No. Okay. So what happens is, again, remember the very first part of, you're not going to get out of this without some pain. That's just a given. So overwhelming emotions, and basically, I will read some of these things just in response to this. So to yours, about the decorations, the amount, the cooking, the amount. Lower your expectations. Lower your expectations. This is a different year. Do it differently. If you have the energy, the urge, and all of the above to decorate just like mom did, and that is what you need to do, then that's what you do. If you're doing it because there's an expectation that it should look like how it looked when mom was there, and everybody will be disappointed if it doesn't look exactly like it did when mom was there, they're going to be disappointed anyway because mom's not there. So decorations aren't really going to keep this holiday the same. Trying to cook the sweet potatoes like mom cooked them. You'll eat them, you'll taste them. Will you enjoy them? Maybe, maybe not. Gift buying. It's overwhelming. in this day and age, unless you do gift cards, which is. When I talked about the mindfulness, it is going back to what do I actually need to do for me in order to be okay so that I can then be there for someone else. That's absolutely essential because we all know in this part of our intellect, if you push yourself, you are all very vulnerable. You will be overwhelmed more easily and knocked off balance more easily. That increases the opportunity for you not to be attentive when you are with someone to their needs. So it's really about taking care of self. So you can do all those physical things we just said. You can, drink more water and less caffeine, or less alcohol over the holidays, or less sugar. All right, so I've just named two of my top three, the sugar and the caffeine. It's like, guess what I want to do when I get stressed? I know better, but it's like, okay, whatever. Watch out for that. Absolutely watch out for that. Because if you want to care for the other person, you have to care for yourself first. So if you're having to drink, an extra drink, which I don't drink alcohol. I know sugar addiction. I don't drink alcohol. But if you need an extra drink to make it to this party, then think about that. So taking care of self, cutting back on the expectations, cutting back on sending out cards to everyone this year. People are so afraid, we all are, we're so afraid that we'll be judged. Well, honestly, you will be. We all are. That's what we humans do. We judge each other. We judge this, we judge that, we judge ourselves. But if there's someone in your life, and I have heard these stories, great Aunt Matilda is never going to talk to you again because you didn't send her, the fruitcake she's always gotten. Well, sometimes you just have to let things go the way they go. That is what death teaches us. We don't have control. If we did, this wouldn't have happened. We don't have control over this. We have minor control over this. Exert control, and this is another one of them it talks about in the book. It says, take charge where you can. Take charge where you can. Well, guess where that is? Right here. Because what we want to do is take charge of a situation or take charge of another person. I don't want my parent, my surviving parent, to feel bad. And I don't want to cry in front of them because they will feel bad. And I don't want them to feel bad. Well, guess what? I can tell you from working with adult children and parents, you both feel bad anyway. And the best way to work with that is to just accept it and not want them to be that person that they were before this happened, because none of you are the same person. Death is the only finite thing in our life. There is before and after. And we are changed. We're changed. So when they talk about being aware of that, that simply means we don't have control over the crisis. We have control over how we react to a crisis. So we are changed, and we can continue to change if we put the effort into that. So part of it is not about, where to have that holiday. It's like, how do you want this holiday to feel? What do you want to do with it?
Honor the
Please write that down. Her response was, I want to honor her memory, but I want to be gentle, be still, and be quiet. That is definitely a challenge in our society. But no one can do that for you but you. How do you support your parent? What are your thoughts on that? How do you want to support your parents? What were you thinking about? How am I going to do this? So response was to be a distraction. Let me find that answer in here because it's like I underline stuff and then let's see. Well, basically, I can't find it. I'm not going to search for it. But what it says is people don't want you to feel sad. So they try to be a distraction. Now, they want you to feel better because it upsets them to feel bad. And so I want you to feel better so that I don't feel so bad. And that is absolutely what happens with adult children and well, younger children too. You know, guess what's the number one concern for most children, regardless of age, when one parent dies? The other parent. Now, I would say 99.9% of the time. I was with a group last night and the women were talking about their adult, sort of adult, they're 23-year-old children, sons, and they were wanting to know how they can parent them when they're also in grief. My response was, take care of yourself and just be there. Just be there. Just be available. You don't have to fill every empty moment with some distraction, because I will guarantee both of you, parent and child, have this one part of you, that grief, that is very much there. Now, this one, I really like this because it says, it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel good. If you're in the kitchen making cookies and it's a good moment, and you both want to be doing this, not just for the other person, but because it's an enjoyable activity, then that's wonderful. If you're making 10 different kinds of cookies because that's what you've always done and you've handed them out to the neighbors and you boxed them and you tied them up, that's work. That's just work. If you decorate that whole house, and then you have to take it down, you know, decorate that whole house and you look at it and you think, because honestly, little disclosure here, and great, I'm on camera. One year in the area I lived, there were lights on everything. I mean, every house had everything lit up. And I was so angry. I mean, I didn't have anyone to be angry at, but anger is just a part of the human condition. And when we as humans don't get what we want, guess what? We resort to the 2-year-old, let me be mad. I don't know what else to do. I really was driving down that street and I thought, I'm just going to rip all those lights off those, you know, it's like, whoa, I can't stand all this. Fa la 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 la. Merry Christmas. My Christmas is not so merry. One woman had lost her adult daughter and she said that one was really hard for her. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. No, New Year means it's a new year without them in it. I'm not having a Happy New Year. So part of how you cope with holidays and other things is, remember the part about you don't get to control what the other person says, you can only control how you respond to it. If you haven't had people say some really, let's just say, awkward things to you, you will. You know, it's like, well, how old were they? Well, they were 85. Well, they led a nice long life. So it's their time to die. What? You know, but they're in a better place. There's a good one. Well, I know they're in a better place, but I don't feel so good. Lots of those. So you have to watch out for the triggers in your head when somebody says Merry Christmas, or you see holiday lights and you want to tear them down. You know, you do all those decorations, you walk in on Christmas Day and you think, I can't stand this. I don't want all this to be up. She's not here. What's the point in this? Knowing yourself. Knowing yourself. Knowing that you're not going to fix anything for anybody else. You can't fix it for yourself. You can only accept, breathe, take care of yourself, and go with this. So, semi-answered that particular one. Semi-answered yours. Yours was families in two opposing areas. One of the things they talk about a lot is talk it over with other people. But when you talk it over with other people, you have to be as honest as you can about what you think you're able to do at this point. Put this list on your refrigerator and remember, you are not above the human condition. And so when you look at this, know that you are vulnerable, you are under stress, and you are easily knocked off balance and overwhelmed. So when you talk to family about, all right, y'all are here and y'all are here, we want to get together, how can we do this? Well, why don't y'all all come to our place? You know, let's all, so just saying, you know, let's think up something different. You've got change anyway. Make it the opportunity for some real communications, if possible. Now, that goes back to family members. And there are some family members that we all have that are not realistic, that demand certain things. If you have always compromised for that person, then you may compromise again. But that is your choice. That is your choice. So I've not given some real specifics. Again, this particular book deals a lot with it. She's given me the 5-minute sign. One of the other things they talk about is memorializing. All right. So again, families are interesting because the one sister that says, well, I don't want it to be a cry fest. She was the one that had pictures made of mom and had them all hung up and all decorated and gave out to everybody. So here we're all trying to, you know, fake it. And we all get these pictures and we're like, so memorializing is wonderful if you're honest and open with it. You know, there's all kinds of ways. All you have to do is go to Pinterest to figure out ways to memorialize. You simply light a particular candle in your own world. You light it every night if you want to. You just allow that to be, you allow them to be a part of you so that they're a part of all of this. One of the things that I would often journal about with my mother was, I am who I am because you were who you were. And so we are that extension. We are, it's not the stuff she had, it's you. You are her legacy, his legacy. That's that role of love. Loving them, loving yourself. When you talk about giving at Christmas, giving to yourself first so that you can give to others as able. That's essential. And then you can plant a tree, hang an ornament. We have activities we do with folks. There's all kinds of holiday memorial services that happen. Just open your mind to think about doing this differently. Okay? Thank you for letting me speak. You're very welcome. Again, this is one that we do. Many churches do memorial services. What we have found with Bluegrass Care Navigators is that a lot of people in this day and age they're not into the whole candle lighting, and it's just not what they do. It's pretty conservative. So we do some fun things, and that's what these are. We make memory ornaments, which you can certainly do at home. Again, Pinterest. We make one out of the clothing from the person, and then we make one with a picture that you Mod Podge onto a little piece of wood. And they're really, excuse me, they're really cute and they're really fun. And the families can get together and do that. That can be what you hand out to people instead of gift cards. It's like, this lovely little memory ornament. So, and call us if anyone needs individuals counseling. The number's in there. That's what we do. All right.